the wilderness, Sangharakshita's generosity. His title is much more colourful, beautiful title than the one that I came up with. I can't remember quite what I came up with, so I'm very glad we've got Padmavajra talking on this theme. So just by a little bit of introduction to Padmavajra. Padmavajra is, well, he lives over at Padmaloka, the retreat centre that's dedicated to helping men train for ordination. And he's been living there, gosh, I don't know how long. Well, I remember going there 20 years ago, and he'd been there for a substantial length of time by then. He very, very kind of important part of the whole community over at Padmaloka, important person, I'd say, because he's such a generous Kalyana Mitra, as we'd say, a spiritual friend. And actually what I wanted to rejoice in is Padmavajra's generosity. He's been a spiritual friend to people for years and years and years. For as long as I can remember, he's been helping men train for ordination. And that's no mean feat. You get involved, you get really, really involved with people. You have to reflect back things that sometimes we don't want to hear. Encourage. You have to get very, very involved with people. And he's ordained, I was trying to get a number from him, but he's ordained too many people to know how many he's ordained. I would suspect it's probably over 100 people. So that's sort of like spiritually having over 100 children. It's slightly different, it has to be said, but you're involved with that many people. So I think, you know, what really strikes me with Padmavajra is his generosity, actually. He's, for as long as I can remember, and before that, he has been involving himself with other people to help them in their spiritual lives. And it's a really demanding, it takes a lot of you to do that. In actual fact, I think Padmavajra is the same age as me. But as in my earthly age is the same age as his order age. I think that is correct. So I think you were ordained in 1976. Is that right, Padmavajra? Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's the main thing actually that struck me with Padmavajra, just his generosity. There's also his generosity of hospitality. If you go to Padmaloka, Padmavajra's generosity is so it's a teaching really, actually. With hospitality, one sort of, I feel I sort of want to reciprocate, and actually with Padmavajra's hospitality, it's so generous, so courteous and so easily given that I sort of feel humbled by it, actually moved and humbled. I can only sort of appreciate it. So very, very courteous, generous host. And then also the term Patisantara came to mind as well, which is a term which sort of means a great spread, and it's thought to be referring to a sort of spread of the Dharma, like a sort of wonderful banquet. And Padmavajra has given very, very generously over the years in this sort of way. His love for the Dharma, his tremendous erudition, he's tremendously well read, he's tremendously articulate, and speaks very persuasively, very movingly. So when you're at one of his talks, it does feel like a sort of great spread has been sort of laid before you. You're sort of invited into this sort of wonderful spread. So yeah, I particularly wanted to just appreciate very fully Padmavajra's generosity in his giving of the Dharma, his hospitality, and his giving in a way of his life to help other people practice the Dharma over years and years and years. I don't remember a time when he wasn't involved publicly in other people's lives. That's quite a thing. So without further ado, over to Padmavajra.
Thank you very much, Artisidi. Can you hear me okay, everybody? Yes, loud and clear. Good, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for that very generous introduction, Artisidi. Really very, very good to be with those of you involved in the Cambridge Buddhist Centre, and I believe there are people there from Peterborough as well, and other places. I can see Archie from Luton, I think, is that right? So, and I'm sure other places. Very good to see old friends and quite a lot of people, obviously, that I don't know. I always find these Zoom talk things a mixture of great pleasure and pleasure at seeing people. I also find them rather poignant because I'd really like to be at the Cambridge Buddhist Centre doing this talk and actually being with people. It's a strange double sensation I find when I do these things, and I'm doing quite a lot of them. So the title of my talk is "Oh Wonder, a Garden in the Wilderness." I think I originally suggested "Oh Wonder, a Garden Amidst Flames," I think. That actually is a line from a poem by the great Arab Andalusian Sufi poet, or Sufi and poet, Ibn Arabi. It's just a great line, isn't it? Oh wonder, a garden amidst the flames. My heart has become capable of every form, and so on and so forth. But I like that idea of oh wonder, a garden in the wilderness. And it does actually relate to a poem of Sangharakshita's written in 1976, the year I was ordained. And I'm going to read that poem to you. It's called Four Gifts. I'll just read it. I come to you with four gifts. The first gift is a lotus flower. Do you understand? My second gift is a golden net. Can you recognize it? My third gift is a shepherd's round dance. Do your feet know how to dance? My fourth gift is a garden planted in a wilderness. Could you work there? I come to you with four gifts. Dare you accept them? I think I always think of Bhante Sangharakshita. He's a great admirer and lover of William Blake, and I sort of see this poem very much in that almost prophetic tradition of poetry and prophetic tradition, like Blake. It's a rather strange poem, almost a sort of riddle. Fortunately, around the same time as he wrote this poem, he gave a series of lectures which are not really considered, I think, these days. He gave them in the William IV room, I think, in down in the Brighton Pavilion. I was at one of them, and it's incredibly ornate, I think, sort of Chinese decorated room down in the Royal Pavilion in Brighton. On the four things, even the four great things that the FWBO, what we now call the Triratna Buddhist Order, Triratna Buddhist community, has to offer the world, has to offer men and women. And really those lectures are the sort of prosaic version of the poem. But I think the poem's important because the imagery is very direct, and it does sort of bring out something else. So I just want to go through these four gifts, relate them to the four things that Sangharakshita talked about, and they really are displaying what Sangharakshita has given. I should just say that, as Artisidi said, I first met Sangharakshita when I was 17 or 18, and I'm 64 next month. So I knew him from a very, very young age. And, I met him not that long before. My last meeting with him was not that long before he died. And I haven't had, and some people have had a lot more contact with him than I have. But compared with many, I've had a lot of contact with him, not just in this country, in different contexts, but also in India, where I lived for some years in different periods, and I was there with Sangharakshita on his return to India when we were first starting our activities there. So I've seen Sangharakshita in all kinds of contexts, and I don't mind telling you that everything that I am comes from Sangharakshita. That's not hyperbole. I was a school dropout, chuck out. I was more or less expelled when I was 16 years old. It's just a rather silly boy, really. Not a terrible person, just terribly bored. So no education to speak of. I think not stupid, but terribly bored, and getting involved in Triratna at a young age. My education really comes from Sangharakshita and his disciples. His lecture series, being on seminar with him, because it wasn't just about learning Buddhism, Buddhist tradition, learning meditation, learning how to live as a Buddhist. It was also getting a broad cultural education, because so often in seminars and lectures and things like that, Sangharakshita would refer to great literature and art and so on, which I just wanted to follow up. So I owe so much to him. I couldn't possibly tell you how much I've been given by Sangharakshita, which continues to unfold. So let's go through this poem. Let's look at the 4 gifts that Sangharakshita says he's bringing. So the first is a lotus flower, a lotus flower. Whenever I read this line, whenever I talk about this line, I always think of my private ordination. In our ordination ceremony, there are 2 parts. A private part where you're just alone with your preceptor, and a public part where you're, that happens in front of other people. There's a particular symbolism to that. But going into the little room in which I was ordained, Sangharakshita was just sitting there holding up a flower, not saying a word, just holding up a flower for me to take. So I always think I've got a picture in my mind of him holding up a flower. But here it's a lotus flower, and of course the lotus is such a rich and central symbol in Buddhist tradition. The lotus is very, very beautiful, pink or red or white or blue. And, from living in India, I mean, lotuses seem to delight in growing in the most black and stinky and viscous of ponds. And they really are, you can see why they are an image of something transcendent, because they sort of hover luminously, if that's a word, above the black water. They really are breathtakingly beautiful flowers, and they really do communicate that sense of something emerging out of darkness and blackness and impurity. And of course, very, very early on in the very origins of Buddhism, immediately after the Buddha's enlightenment, his waking up to the nature of things, he has a great vision of life, which he sees with his Buddha eye, his eye of enlightenment. So it's his transcendent vision and you can only really use a metaphor. And the metaphor he uses, he said he saw people, us, like lotuses in a great lake. Some are born in the water and their buds are shut. They're trying to grow out of the water, and others are emerging, and others are opening up to the sunlight. And in seeing that, it said that his great compassion arose. It's very important to understand that the Buddha's compassion is not anything like pity or sentimentality. It's a vision of our deepest nature, a vision of what we can become, a vision that we can actually realize the liberation that he himself realized. And of course, it's a vision of growth. And in seeing that, the Buddha spent the rest of his days communicating his liberating vision to living beings. So what I think Sangharakshita is getting at here in saying my first gift is a lotus flower is he's trying to show what life really is and what life is really for. The nature of life actually is growth. Life wants to grow. You can sort of see that all around you. And of course, we have the whole notion of evolution. Life wants to grow and mature beyond itself. And that's our nature. That's our nature. Our nature really is to want to grow and mature and grow out and beyond what we've been given. But the fact is, our growth, human growth, is very different from growth in nature. It has now to be individual and conscious. We can't just be carried along by nature. We've actually got to take hold of our lives and actually make a conscious attempt to become, to develop ourselves. And Sangharakshita, I know, believed that if that feeling, that longing even to grow in consciousness and to develop as a human being is thwarted either by ourselves or by other factors, it can become very destructive. This is a very interesting idea. He hasn't sort of talked about it very much, but he does talk about it. That if you, as it were, suppress or repress your urge to grow in the direction of moving beyond yourself, growing in consciousness, that urge won't go quietly. It might even become quite destructive. It's a very, very interesting idea. Becoming, bhava, as it's called in Buddhist tradition, is really the life of life. When you really take up Buddhist practice in the sense of really growing and developing yourself, you really come alive. Interestingly, in the team meeting before the class, a number of people were saying that they're doing mindfulness courses. And it's very interesting that the Buddha in mindfulness, of course, is a big thing these days, isn't it? But it's very interesting to hear what the Buddha has to say about mindfulness. He says, mindfulness is the way to the deathless. Those who are mindful do not die. Those who are unmindful are already dead. And I think that gives you a tremendous clue as to what mindfulness really is. It's an alertness, it's a wakefulness to your nature, it's a wakefulness to what life is for. Life is to develop oneself in the direction, according to the Buddha, of enlightenment itself. And so this first gift that Sangharakshita offers, he sees it's not just pointing to the nature of life in terms of development. It's actually giving methods or a method of individual development. This is actually the first thing that you get if you come to a Buddhist center. You get a method of development. You get taught a meditation practice, mindfulness of breathing, metta bhavana. You get taught the precepts. If you go on a Buddhist course, you get taught how to apply mindfulness in daily life. And notice this word method and not technique. Sangharakshita is very anti-technique. I think what he means by technique is something which is sort of twiddling with your knobs and maybe altering you and adjusting you to conform to a certain way of life. A method is more a matter of, really applying the principles of growth and development to your whole life, and bringing therefore a transformation, a complete transformation of consciousness. And this goes on. In Triratna Buddhist Order, Sangharakshita gives a particular system, path of spiritual practice, Dharma practice, bringing about, actually, the vision is, in the end, a complete spiritual rebirth. You could say, continuing the image of the lotus, the opening of the 1,000-petaled lotus of enlightenment itself. What we're really concerned with is the full flowering and flourishing of our being. That's what we're really concerned with. That's what Sangharakshita gives. When you might wonder, some of you with the order members here, why do we have these Sanskrit names? Well, these Sanskrit names are really pointing to the need for our own complete transformation. They're reminding us of our purpose in life. They're reminding us of our need to grow and develop and to transform and to fully flower. And he asks that question. My first gift is a lotus flower. Do you understand? It's so important that we understand what life is for. I mean, it's, looking at the world from my from my country retreat center, such as I can. I mean, it seems to me that the need to understand what life is for is even more it's even more imperative than ever it was. I mean, probably every age says this, but my impression is so many people are suffering because they actually don't have a clear method of development. They haven't been given that opportunity to connect with what life is really for. There aren't those effective methods to bring about change and transformation. It's very important to find that. It doesn't matter if it's Buddhist or anything else. We need to find that. It's very interesting, there's a lot of concerns at the moment about liberty and freedom and so on and so forth. I'm doing a lot of teaching via Zoom to India at the moment. And Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the first law minister of the government of India, himself a Buddhist eventually, who came from the so-called untouchable community, said some very interesting things about liberty and freedom. Obviously, that's a huge issue for the socially oppressed in India. But yes, he talks about liberty and freedom in terms of the right to life and so on. But he says the real meaning of liberty and freedom is to develop one's powers to the full. That's what a true society should be doing. It should be creating the conditions to develop our powers and faculties to the full. That's what Sangharakshita gives, actually. That's what he's given me, and I know many others, by starting our order and movement, by communicating methods of development. These are opportunities to develop our powers to the full. And it's very important that one recognizes these powers and qualities. I mean, so many people, I meet a lot of people in my Buddhist life, so many people really lack confidence in their own powers and qualities. It's so moving to see. You have a conversation and the self-doubt is sort of palpable, but you can see that they have incredible qualities, and you just have to, show them to them. And I feel that I'm able to do that because what I've been given myself by Sangharakshita. So let's go on to the second gift. My second gift is a golden net. A golden net. Well, gold, of course, is the most precious of metals. It's completely pure metal. So we're talking about a pure golden net, a pure golden net. Can you recognize it? Can you recognize this golden net? Can you know it? Can you see it? Can you acknowledge it with appreciation? Can you be definite about it being there? How does this net stand out? How distinctive is it to you? It's something that's there all the time. He's asking us to recognize the golden net. That means it's there, but we're not necessarily seeing it. This vast golden net is something we need to remember to see. This is related then to the second great thing that Sangharakshita feels that we have to offer. This is a vision of life, a vision of existence, even a vision of human existence. We badly need vision. We badly need vision. In the Bible, in Proverbs, there's a great line: without vision, the people perish. Without vision, the people perish. That is so true. When we don't have vision, when we don't see deeply, profoundly, when we don't see afar and with magic in our eyes, we perish. When we don't see meaning, we perish. And in the Pali Suttas, the early teachings of the Buddha, you find a similar thing where the Buddha is being asked to teach, and you know, the people who are asking him to teach are saying people are perishing through not hearing the Dhamma, through not hearing the truth. You get this way of describing the Buddha's seeing, the Buddha's enlightenment, as opening the eye of vision. The Buddha is sometimes called Chakuma, the one with the eye, the seer. And of course, what he's seeing is actually very hard for us to see, because enlightenment is said to be a takavacharo, beyond the sphere of thought, beyond conceptualization. It's direct vision. And it's a profound vision. It's gambhira, it's very deep and profound. But it's even more necessary to see. It's even more necessary to see because we are in dark times and gloomy times. I was reminding of this afternoon. I'd had a session this morning on Zoom, and this afternoon I really had to take a walk, even though it was really pouring with rain here in South Norfolk. And I went up the farm track and wandered into the wood at the end of the track, and I found a place where you can go really deeply, right off the paths, right into the thickets. It's fantastic because it's a kind of wood and marsh, and it's a kind of hinterland of earth and water and wood and tangled branches, and thank goodness for wellies. And there are a lot of trees that were uprooted in storms decades ago, great beech trees, which are still growing. Amazing, absolutely amazing. And I found myself in this incredibly grey sky with the rain pouring down. I found myself in the midst of a sort of thicket of yellow, golden yellow beech leaves. And it was really weird because it was so gloomy, and yet these beech leaves were luminous. I was in the midst of this golden light. It was quite incredible and so uplifting amidst the gloom. And walking back, I couldn't help but be reminded of a line from one of Ezra Pound's cantos. Wonderful line, one of those rare, wonderful lines that you find in Ezra Pound. In the gloom, the gold gathers the light against it. In the gloom, the gold gathers the light against it. And I think this is, I think I was also thinking of this line because of the gloom of the times we're in. We actually need to gather the light into the gold of vision. And for there to be vision, we need to purify ourselves. We need to purify our sight. When Sangharakshita talked about vision in these lectures on this subject, he talked first of all about, using the metaphor of bad eyesight and good eyesight, to use that as a metaphor for seeing. First, we need to purify our seeing. We need to purify of all bias, purify of all negative emotion, of all ill will, all aversion, anger, envy, conceit, all those things. It's craving. You can't see if you're angry. You can't see if your mind is full of envy and conceit and those things. You can't see anything clearly. There has to be a purification with love and awareness in order to see. It is a kind of objective seeing, but not a cold objectivity. It's an objectivity that's alive with warmth. And then vision, for there to be vision, it needs to go deeply into things. It needs to penetrate right inside. And this is why you need a concentrated mind. You need to concentrate your mind in order to see deeply. This is why it's so mindfulness of breathing is so important, to gather you together, to gather all of you together in order to really go deeply into the nature of things. Then again, to be able to see, to have real vision, it's got to be all embracing. It cannot be partial. You have to have a consciousness that is really spread out over everything. And this is where I think Metta Bhavana actually is a wonderful practice to enable you to really see, because that's an all-embracing emotion. So we need to purify our consciousness in order to see, in order to have vision, in order not to perish. But then again, we also need help. So even if we have that kind of consciousness, we need the help of spiritual friends. We need the help of teachers. We need the help of the Buddha in order to get some ideas of what we're looking for. Yes, the Buddha's vision in the end is beyond words, but he did articulate the teaching. He did point to things in ideas and concepts and principles that we can pay attention to. So we have the vision, but we also need to start forming a way of seeing the world through ideas. The Buddha himself likened his view of life, which is the expression of his vision, to a great net. The first discourse in the Buddha, in the Pali text, the oldest text, is called the Brahmajala Sutta, the discourse on the all-embracing net, the net that gathers up all other partial views, as it were. But what is the content of that? What is the sort of essential content in sort of conceptual terms? Well, it is that same becoming I was talking about with the first gift, but seen as the great vision of the wheel of life. You know, if you want to sort of sum up, if you like, if you want a very, very sort of quick summary of the Buddha's essential vision, it's the wheel of life in all its detail, the path out of that wheel, we sometimes call it the spiral path, the unfolding path, and the Buddha. Sometimes this might be the mandala of the five Buddhas. This is what you need to see. If you really want to know the whole of the Dharma in just three simple things, it's wheel, path, and goal. It's all there. And all of it is characterized by what's called pratitya samutpada, conditioned co-production. Everything is becoming, but there's different aspects to that. There's a cyclic aspect to that with the wheel, and there's a progressive unfolding aspect to that with the spiral. So this is Sangharakshita's second gift. It's the gift of vision. It's the gift of the Dharma. And you know, he spent his whole life communicating the Buddha's teaching I'm just looking up at my library and seeing his complete works appearing, and all over my room I've got stacks of books, and so much of it is Sangharakshita's teaching. Not just in clear ideas, not just in clear methods of practice, but very importantly is the employment of image and myth and symbol. This is also a very important part of communicating the vision of things. I've just been on a retreat here called the Mythic Context, one of the training retreats for people who've asked for ordination. And this retreat is really participating in a great sort of, if you like, ritual practice called the going for refuge and prostration practice. And in this practice, you visualize a great lotus tree, if you can imagine such a thing, peopled by Buddhas and teachers with the Buddha at the center, which is really trying to convey the vision of the Buddhist, the whole of the Buddhist tradition. You don't just visualize that, you visualize yourself together with your father and mother either side of you, and all living beings whatsoever. And you imagine that all of them are participating in the act of what we call going for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. That commitment to the life of becoming in the direction of enlightenment. And really what you're enacting is what Sangharakshita has called the cosmic going for refuge. He sees that actually the great myth of life is that really absolutely everything aspires to go beyond itself. I mean, this is quite a vision that you're enacting, but you can really feel it when you really get into it. A golden net is also a vision, an image of interconnectedness. Nets crisscross, don't they? The cords crisscross one another. So there's interconnection. So it's also an image, I think, of egolessness, selflessness. This is a very, very important realization, if you have the vision of things. But egolessness is not disappearing into a vacuum, a nihilistic void. You can also describe it as the realization as your profound interconnection with all of life, with how we all flow actually into one another, and we have therefore responsibilities in relation to that. We are profoundly relational beings. So this brings us to the third gift. So Sangharakshita's third gift is a shepherd's round dance. So Sangharakshita's offering, pointing to a dance that we can join, a shepherd's round dance. When I was about 17 or 18, I became what's known as a mitra. This is a sort of the sort of first level of committing yourself to our community and to the Buddhist path. And in those days, when you became a mitra, you had a sort of private ceremony with Sangharakshita presiding, and you had two order members who became your sort of special friends, as it were, with from the order, your Kalyana Mitras. Mine were an order member named Buddhadasa and an order member named Vasantra, who were very important and remain important to me, very important in my early days. So I went into that ceremony, and you made offerings and so on, and Sangharakshita gave a little discourse on the significance of the occasion. In those days, if you've seen pictures of Sangharakshita, in those days he was wearing yellow robes, had very long hair and rather bent glasses, probably a bit unshaven as well, very different from the sort of grandfatherly pictures that you have in later years. And he wasn't smiling particularly. And he said to me, becoming a mitra is like joining a dance. You've been on the edge of the dance. You've been looking in on the dance. You've tried out a few steps, but this is you joining the dance. In this act, this ritual act, you're joining the dance. Everything's been thought, everything's been felt, everything's been said. Now you're joining the dance. Now is the time for action. And he really wasn't smiling. I thought he was telling me off. But I've never forgotten that. I've never forgotten that. This whole idea of entering the Sangha formally as joining a dance, and it's definitely an action. I've never forgotten his emphasis on action rather than just thoughts, feelings, words, which I could be very good at. And it's so we're talking about Sangha, spiritual community, as a dance. Oh yeah, he also said, maybe one day you'll get to the center of the dance, but this is you joining the dance. So I really like this idea of Sangha, spiritual community, as a dance, and it's a shepherd's round dance. It's not some difficult ballet or some, kind of complicated contemporary dance of some kind or other. It's a kind of ordinary dance. Very much, I think he's got very much a sort of feeling of some sort of pastoral, almost tribal folk dance that anybody can do, and anybody can play a part in. It's not about solos. Maybe somebody does do a solo every now and then, but that's fine. It's really something we can do together and enjoy, and being really companionable with one another. And this is really what the Sangha in the widest sense is. Yes, we have friends, we have mitras, we have order members, we have younger order members, more experienced order members. But the thing is, this dance is, nobody's static in this dance. You can't have a static dance, can you? Dance is all movement. It's all alive. You're moving in and out and moving to the center and so on and so forth. And it must be a dance, the dance of Sangha. It must be alive with metta, with friendship and mutual helpfulness. I mean, you can't do a dance if you're not aware of one another, if you're not in if you don't have a vitality of connection with one another. And Sangharakshita, this is related to this idea that our Sangha could be a nucleus, a seed of a new kind of society, a sort of seed, an example of a new way of being together, characterized by friendship, characterized by individual freedom and friendship. It's very interesting that the word friendship is etymologically related to the word free, as well as the word, the Sanskrit word priya, which means dear, but it's also related to freedom. To really be a friend, you need to be free to be a friend. You need to be an individual to be a friend to one another. But the Sangha must really exemplify friendship, not just within itself, but as an example, really, to attract people. I mean, one of the things that always strikes me, well, I hear a lot of life stories on our retreats here, on the training retreats for men in pastoral ordination. People tell their life stories, and so often people say, yeah, they went along to the center, the teaching was good, but what really got them was seeing the friendships between people, between everybody, the way people are enjoying being with one another, and they kind of wanted it to be part of that. It's very, very attractive if it's genuine. I mean, it's got to be real. It's got to be real friendship, not pretend. It's got to be the real thing. But it's so attractive. I remember one friend of mine, an order member now, he said what attracted him was actually seeing an argument kicking off between a couple of people running the class. And it was the way they had the argument that he found really exciting, because it wasn't acrimonious. So something kicked off, but he thought that was really good. There was something really genuine there. In one of his early lectures given in the West, Sangharakshita, in talking about going for refuge to the Sangha, as it's called, he says you're moving from mere contact, sort of superficial social contact, to communication. And he defines what he means by communication. I'm still working out what this means all these years. He describes it as a vital mutual responsiveness. Fantastic phrase. A vital mutual responsiveness, a common exploration of the spiritual world in complete harmony and complete honesty, and where you lose the distinction between the more or less experienced. Power and status have no place in this. There's just this responsive learning and giving. That's the vitality of Sangha. That's the shepherd's round dance that we're joining. So do your feet know how to dance? Do you know how to do that? And of course, you learn the steps by joining. You learn the steps by plunging in. But at your own pace. This is very, very important in the Sangha. There must be no compulsion. It must be at your own pace. I know I've been looking at old seminar extracts where, Sangharakshita, you can really see the way he's thinking about what's really needed. Yes, there's a spiritual community, there's an order, but he said, actually, people also need to feel that they're part, as it were, of a tribe. Don't take that language too literally. He's trying to find words for a very strongly positive social context to be part of that has real meaning. And one of the things that's so striking is just how lonely people are. You just keep hearing about a lot of loneliness. And perhaps that's particularly strong, must be particularly strong at the moment. And one of the things I think it's very important that we offer as a spiritual community is something that can assuage loneliness. Loneliness is incredibly painful. Yes, ultimately we are alone, and you have to live the Dharma life alone as an individual. As one of the great Buddhist teachers, Shantideva, says, we are born alone, we die alone. But for that very reason, we need friends. We really need friends. We really need help and support. And it makes such a difference to people's lives. So finally, the fourth gift, which he describes as a garden planted in a wilderness. This is the, oh wonder, a garden planted in a wilderness. And wilderness is wonderful. I was in sort of wilderness this afternoon. It's a little bit of wilderness, but it really is. When you get right out into that wood in the marsh, you can really feel away from things, especially when you see, the other day I was up there and I saw the skin of a deer. Amazing. I don't know what had ripped the skin off this deer. And, that gave me a bit of pause for thought, even in, quaint rural Norfolk. Goodness me. Wilderness is wonderful, empty, untouched places. And we know they're under threat where nature takes its course. But of course, they're dangerous places. Let's not be sentimental. And of course, by the wilderness, what Sangharakshita means is the world. Just the world. We know how dangerous the world can be. Wonderful it can be, but it can also be dangerous. And it can feel very dangerous, perhaps especially at the moment. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. People are feeling that there's a lot of danger, a lot of threats of different kinds. No need to rehearse the different threats, the very obvious threats of our times. It's easy in relation to these things to shrink back, to curl up, to want to just hide, or to lash out violently. To we can either go passive or indulge in self-righteous indignation. So all the more reason to kind of create gardens in the wilderness, to create places. Gardens, I think gardens are so wonderful, aren't they? I mean, I don't mean, you know, sort of very tight, as it were, anal gardens, if you see what I mean, but I mean gardens that, you know, where nature is cultivated and organized into a particular kind of harmonious shape, almost like a mandala, a sacred circle, if you like. And by gardens, we mean places, environments in which we can come together with others, in which the Sangha can come together with one another, in which people can arrive and be in that place free of the burdens and the fears and the worries of the world, where politics has no place, you know, and all of those concerns are just absent. And the environment is entirely to do with the human being as a human being, free, utterly free to become, to develop, to unfold with one another. This is what our centers are. This is what the Cambridge Buddhist Center is. It's what Padmaloka is. That's what we want it to be. When people walk through that door, there's that sense of, oh, wow, this is a garden. This is a place where I can flourish and mature. It's sort of protected, as it were, from the world. We need these things. I've got to use a word that people probably don't like. We need actually institutions. So a dirty word, but very positive institutions, constructive ways in which we can be together. These are our gardens. And throughout Buddhist tradition, these places are rightly valued. Temples, viharas, monasteries, shrines, really, really very, very important. I mean, throughout all religious traditions, these places have always been sanctuaries and spaces in which people can, well, be truly human. It's very interesting, you know, quite a lot of people are attracted by the figure of Padmasambhava, you know, the great 8th century Indian saint, yogin, kind of magician, and what he did in Tibet to convert the gods of the soil who were being very troublesome to the establishment of Buddhism in Tibet. He had to convert them because they were causing so many trouble. But why were they doing that? They were doing that because the king of Tibet was trying to build a monastery, a temple. He was trying to create a garden, an environment, a place where teaching could be given, where initiation could be given, where meditation could be practiced, where culture could be could flourish, where the individual could grow. It's when you do that, when you really establish yourself in that way, that you get a kickback. That's when the world kicks back, when you really do something. When things are in the privacy of your minds, in the privacy of your homes even, in a way, not a lot happens. It's when you go public, when you come out, as it were, as a Buddhist collectively and do something, that there can be a response. And that's why it can be very hard, very challenging to create gardens, to create centers and institutions, even harder to keep them going, to maintain them. Easy to start, hard to keep them going. I was very struck by what Ada Siddhi was saying about how important dana, generosity, has been for you in keeping the center alive. It's the hardest of all practices, actually, to keep our gardens going year after year, day after day. And so could you work in these places? Could you support these places? Could you be in these gardens in the wilderness? And these gardens, Sangharakshita sees as providing a pattern for a new world. I mean, it's a bold vision. Our centers and our communities and our retreat centers, and you know, even our team-based right livelihood businesses, and you continue to have them in Cambridge. He sees these as being a sort of pattern for what the world could be. It might sound impossibly idealistic, but if they are characterized, if they are environments characterized where the human being, the individual human being can flourish with others, well, that is a pattern for a new kind of world. And often we take these things for granted, and even the people who work in them for granted. You know, sometimes it can be very easy to sit back and criticize, you know, what goes on, but perhaps we really notice them when they're taken away or they're threatened. We see what we're missing. We've managed to hold our first 2 retreats here at Padmaloka under very different circumstances for the first time since March, and it's been wonderful to have people here again. It means so much to us. It's our oxygen and nourishment. I mean, we get on very well on our own, but we live even here to benefit others. And people are so grateful. I mean, so incredibly grateful to be back and to experience that flourishing, to be in this kind of environment. We've also, I think, discovered a new set of I'm discovering a new kind of garden. It's called a virtual garden. It's called a Zoom garden. And obviously I'm in a Zoom garden right now. And actually it's a really good garden. You know, this garden can be a space in which we can flourish. We can feel ourselves flourishing. I think we also need to kind of there are gardens of the mind. We need to create the gardens of the mind, the mandalas and the temples of the mind. I think one of the things about this time also gives us an opportunity to exist more on the level of the heart and the level of consciousness, and keeping our friends vividly in mind. Our Buddhist friends, I mean all friends, vividly in our consciousness. Something Sangharakshita has talked about, how important it is to live on the level of consciousness, which isn't just, it's not thought, it's not brain, it's actually ascending to a more archetypal connection with one another. This is where Metta is so very, very important, and having a sense of the vivid presence of friends who aren't physically here. So have the courage, you know, to work in this garden. Could you work in this garden in the wilderness? And his final phrase in his poem is, "These are my 4 gifts. Dare you accept them?" So the gifts are a sort of challenge. I mean, we don't always sort of, you know, when we're given a lovely gift, we don't often sort of experience them as something we dare to accept. But I think he's saying that because these gifts require a response. They require action. They're very, very rich gifts indeed. And when I think of what Sangharakshita has given me, and they are in these 4 gifts, they're so rich, but they've demanded something from me. When Sangharakshita died, I did a lot of reflecting on you know, what he'd given me. And I was looking through old letters and remembering meetings, and even remembering my ordination. And this very, very strong sense of being seen by someone I revered greatly. The message always was I needed to take responsibility for myself, and that I could take responsibility for myself and take responsibility for the welfare of my community in the widest sense. And everything that he's given has given me has been about that. Sometimes that's been uplifting, inspirational. Sometimes that's been deeply challenging. So daring to accept these gifts means really, in my case, it means changing myself and dedicating myself to serving others. That's what they mean for me. as I've said, we are in demanding and difficult times, and Buddhists and those sympathetic to Buddhism have a strong contribution to make, actually, to these times. Like I said before, don't shrink back. Look more deeply. See the good, see the gold around you. I mean, one of the things very, very striking for me in this time, I don't know if it's to do with the times or what, I've no idea, but I've just been noticing that I'm seeing people's qualities much more vividly than ever before. Every single meeting seems heightened right now, and people's qualities seem to shine more vividly. And it seems to me, I mean, I've been on these retreats recently and thinking, goodness me, I mean, if people get the right kind of connection and communication, the future of our Sangha is going to be incredible. I mean, there are amazing people around. One of the things that Sangharakshita had was tremendous faith in human beings. He's a very realistic man, very, very realistic about what goes on, not at all sentimental, very practical, but had this tremendous faith in what's possible. And he spent his whole life giving to encourage to encourage the best in people. And at my last meeting with him, he's very old, really not long before he died, we were, communicating about different things, and very matter of factly, he said he just had complete confidence in the future of the order, in the future of Tri Ratna. And he meant by that as something alive, not just something surviving as a sort of buildings or dead institutions, but he meant something alive and living to give to the world. So really, that's it. That's my talk on Oh Wonder, a garden planted in the wilderness. I hope you've found it helpful and useful. It's great being with you. And well, I'll stop there. Thank you very much for listening.